Hello, I'm Gary. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you've been here before. Today is Combo Day, so we have the Combo Special Edition of the build and everything else to do with this, the North American F-86F-40 Sabre fighter in 1/48 scale from Airfix. This being Combo Day, first of all we'll have a look at the history of the Sabre. We'll then have a look at the box opening, what you get inside the box, what options there are for you, and then I'll show you how I built my one. Now, all of these are in chapters, so you can hop backwards and forwards as your heart's desire. Now, if you enjoy the video, and I really hope you do, then please do remember to subscribe to the channel. You can do that by clicking on that tiny little logo down there in the bottom right corner. If you'd like to support future productions, then you can do so through Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. Links to those are in the information box below, as is a link to the Airfix online store. Now, if you click on that link, buy anything, maybe even buy one of these new Sabres, then at no extra cost to you, Airfix will make a small donation to this channel. And of course, if you're an Airfix Club member, you'll get your 10% online discount as well. Okay, so that's enough of all of that. Let's get on with the history of the F-86 Sabre. Certainly one of the most important fighter aircraft ever built, the F-86 Sabre had naval ancestry. In 1944, a requirement was issued by the US Navy for a jet-powered carrier-borne fighter. North American, drawing heavily on the design of the P-51 Mustang, offered the FJ-1 Fury. The straight wing and large dive brakes limited the design somewhat, but in 1948 it was the first jet to enter operational service at sea with the US Navy, equipping Squadron VF-5A on USS Boxer. However, advances in aerodynamics overtook the Fury very quickly. With just 33 aircraft built, it was soon replaced by the F9F2 Panther. North American then modified the basic design to meet a US Air Force requirement for a new escort fighter and fighter bomber. When the straight-winged XP-86 looked like it would lose out, mainly on speed, to its rivals the Lockheed XP-80 and the Republic XP-84, North American turned to recently seized data on swept-wing designs from Germany. Mated with their leading-edge slat for low-speed flight, the swept wing proved itself in wind tunnel tests, and the iconic design of the F-86 was born. The first flight of the XF-86 prototype was on the 1st of October 1947, piloted by George Welsh and powered by a J-35 engine of 4,000 pounds thrust. The first service aircraft, the F-86A, entered service in 1949 with the 9th Fighter Squadron, powered by the improved J-47. With the introduction of the Russian MiG-15 into the Korean War, US forces found that their straight-winged P-80 Shooting Star and F-84 Thunderjets were outclassed, so the swept-wing F-86 was rushed to the Far East. Although still in some ways inferior to the Soviet aircraft, evolving tactics and the later introduction of the improved F-86F made the Sabre a match for the MiG-15. All but one of the 41 American aces of the war flew the F-86. The very different F-86D model was designed as an all-weather interceptor, equipped with the distinctive nose radar fairing, an afterburning engine, and a tray of rockets in place of the guns. Later models of the F-86D, or Sabre Dog as it was known, mounted 20mm cannon in place of the rockets. The F-86E variant introduced the one-piece all-flying tail, the whole horizontal stabilizer acting as an elevator for improved high-speed control. This was quickly followed by the F-86F, with an uprated engine, no wing slats, and a slightly longer wing. The lack of slats led to some issues with handling and a high landing speed, but gave extra space for fuel in the wings. In the F-86F-40, Considerable redesign of the wing allowed the slats to be replaced, reducing landing speeds and improving handling further. The Sabre was built under licence by Canadair, where it was known as the CL-13, and was used by various countries outside of Canada, including 428 aircraft flown by the Royal Air Force and 300 flown in Germany. The Sabre was also built in Australia by the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation. This was heavily modified to take the very powerful Rolls-Royce Avon 26 engine, two 30mm cannon in place of the standard 650 caliber machine guns, and the ability to carry AIM-9 Sidewinder heat-seeking missiles. In an odd twist of fate, the Sabre also returned to sea as the FJ2 and FJ3 Fury fighter. In total, 9,860 Sabres were built, including the Canadian and Australian variants, and those aircraft built under licence in Italy and Japan, making it the most produced Western jet fighter. It was operated by more than 20 air forces. There are about 25 airworthy Sabres still flying, the majority of which are in the USA, with 100 or more on display in museums and other locations all over the world. This F-86F-40 Sabre is the second boxing of a new tool released in 2021, the first kit being the Canadair Sabre F4. Previously, Airfix has only sold the F-86 in 1/72nd scale. The first of these was a 1975 tooling of the F-86D, which had its last reboxing in 1986. The second was a new tool of the F-86F in 2010, followed by decals for the Canadair Sabre F4 in the same year, its use in a club release with the MiG-15 in 2011, then the last release with new decals in 2014. In 1/48th scale, the competition seems to be mainly from the Hasegawa F-86F-40, which derives from a 1996 tooling, or the Italeri F-86, which comes from an original Esky tooling of 1979 via various new boxing and with added parts. This new Airfix F-86F-40 has 156 pieces, not all of which you'll have to use, and is rated at skill level 2. It would be useful if you've made a couple of kits before attempting this, mainly because of its scale. The box comes with a token for 3 flying hours. You can collect these as a member of the Airfix Club towards a new kit in the future, or you can donate them to Models for Heroes. A link to this excellent charity is in the information box below. Onto the kit itself, and inside the box is this big plastic bag with all the parts. There are 4 sprues of grey plastic and 1 of transparent. This first sprue holds the fuselage halves and the wing lower skin, as well as various fuel tanks. The second sprue has the upper wing skin, slats, elevators and instrument panels. On this third sprue are things like the engine inlets and exhaust, the cockpit hub, and interior structures like the undercarriage bays, and on this last sprue are the seat options and pilot, guns and undercarriage components. The clear sprue has the windscreen and hood, plus some options for the landing lights and navigation lights. Looking more closely at the plastic, it has just a hint of lack of crispness in the mouldings compared with those I've seen on other Airfix kits recently. The pilot figure's okay, looks a bit shiny, and again doesn't have that final edge of crispness. That said, the parts seem well enough moulded, like this nose gear leg. The cockpit hub has the suggestion of some content, but not enough to dry brush, so I shall rely on the provided decals for the side panels. There are 2 instrument panels in the kit, only one is relevant to this aircraft, the other is for the earlier Canadair release, I suppose. This has an attempt at raised edges for dry brushing, but will make applying the decals a bit more tricky. I may just sand these off. On the body, the panel lines are wide and deep enough for panel washing later, but again seem to lack that final look of crispness. There is the usual instruction leaflet in the usual Airfix style, very readable, and the instructions seem very well thought out. There is a suggested space for the nose ballast, 10 grams is needed, and there are pieces of the wing root that need to be removed if you're having the gun base open, which I shall be. There's an interesting piece of modelling here where the landing lights are separate, and there is a different piece if you have them stowed with the gear retracted. Air brakes can be open or closed, as can the wing slats, and there is a choice of fuel tank size, either 100 gallon or 166 gallon. And as usual, there's the option of having the canopy open or closed. There are two high quality printed sheets supplied. The first shows the locations of the common decals, all 120 of them. Then a colour sheet with the decal options. First is Scheme A, an aircraft of the Flying Jokers aerobatic team of 332 Squadron Royal Norwegian Air Force in 1962. This is the subject of the box art. On the reverse is Scheme B, an aircraft of the 1st Air Wing of the Japan Air Self-Defense Force in 1975, and this is the scheme I'll be building today. The decal sheet is large and comprehensive. Printing by Cartograph is, as normal, of very good quality with strong colour density, good sharpness and excellent registration. The common decals, essentially the instruments and the stencils, are gathered at the top of the sheet. Along the middle are the decals for the Royal Norwegian Air Force aircraft in Scheme A, and then along the bottom edge are the decals for the Japanese aircraft in Scheme B. As usual, I've primed the kit with a light coat of grey primer. Then I'll do some painting. First are the inside surfaces of the air intake duct, which are aluminium. Next I'll spray the cockpit tub in light gold grey, and when that's dry I'll take the tub off the sprue so I can add the first decals, the instruments, on the side panels of the tub. I'll also add the decals to the instrument panel that I've already painted black. Use plenty of decal solution for this as the instruments are quite highly raised in the moulding. While that's drying, I'll assemble the two halves of the intake duct. They go together easily enough. Back to the cockpit, and I'm slotting the instrument panel into the front end of the tub. The control column comes with a base in two halves, which I find very fiddly. When they're together, leave it to set. In the meantime, I'll make a start on the seat. Now there are two versions supplied. The Norwegian aircraft has an ejection seat. The Japanese version I'm doing is just a seat. Neither comes with straps. There's a side panel, one on each side, then this headrest that sits at the top. When that's all setting, I'll install the control column from earlier. I've painted the boot in olive drab, the column in cockpit grey and the top in black. Then the seat slots into place again. Olive drab for the seats, light gold grey colours on the sides, and with this bright red on the headrest. Before I go any further, I'll add panel wash to the wiring here behind the seat, as this will be visible under the canopy. Then I can fit the cockpit tub onto the top of the air intake like so. Then there's this little inlet cone for the front of the engine. It comes in two halves, which then fit into this inlet fan assembly. All of that then sits at the back of the inlet itself. I'm not sure if anyone will ever see this again, but I can only assume it's at least possible. Then the nose fairing is attached at the other end of the inlet. I've added some US interior green to the nose gear bay, and I can add the walls at this point. The inlet duct effectively becomes the core of the whole of the front end of the model. The fuselage itself is next, and if you're not having the ammo bays open, then you need to add this fillet piece now. I'm actually having one side open, so I can do both options. There's also a blanking piece for the gun bay. Again, use this if the bays are not going to be open. For the other side of the fuselage, I'm going to assemble the gun bay I'll be able to see, already painted in interior green and aluminium. The guns are painted in gunmetal and sit in the bay like so. Notice how the barrels are at different lengths. Start with the shortest one, which is at the top. Now beneath the gun bay are the ammo boxes, one for each gun. These I've painted in dark aluminium. Then the feed links, I've painted them black with brass accents to suggest shell casings. These connect the side of each gun to its ammo box. Then this whole assembly can go into the other half of the fuselage. There's a small piece near the base of the tail on the fuselage that needs to be cut out. It makes room for a fillet piece later on. There are also two holes to drill out for some sort of tiny vent cover later on. A 1.3mm drill bit is used. More choices, and if you're having the air brake in the closed position, then fit these blanking plates now. I'm having them open, so instead I'm fitting this interior plate piece. Next is the exhaust pipe, comes in two halves, and I've already sprayed it in burnt iron. A turbine disc piece goes in at the wider end. Again, you might not see this in the finished model, but it does help locate the pipe in the fuselage. It sits into the port side like so. There's also a fillet piece that goes in underneath the tail fin. The instructions helpfully say to add 10 grams of nose weight. I use these bicycle balance weights as they're 5 grams each and self-adhesive. They sit on top of the air inlet just in front of the cockpit. Now the whole nose section assembly can sit into the port side fuselage. It all goes in very, very well, I must say. Then the other half of the fuselage can be added. It does need an occasional bit of fiddling to get the parts lining up in the right place, but once you have, it's easy to glue it together and tape it all up to set. Now while the fuselage is drying, I'll assemble the wings. First I have to drill these holes for the fuel tanks. Now strangely, the front hole is 2.3mm and the rear is 1.9mm. These seem very odd sizes. Why not just 2mm each? It's not like you're going to fit them the wrong way round now, is it? Anyway, if you're doing the kit with undercarriage up, there's a single blanking piece that covers the undercarriage bays. I'm not, so I'm going to start building the walls of the wheel bay. Now, on the front wall of the wheel bay are these two small tabs. You can have the main gear doors closed even with the wheels down, in which case leave them alone. I'm having the main gear doors open, so these need to be trimmed off. This front wall piece then sits on the roof of the wheel well, like this. There's also a rear wall, which also has those tabs you might want to trim off. Then the whole of this assembly can go into the lower wing. Back to the fuselage, and I'm giving the inside of the air brakes a spray of interior green over aluminium, and the same colour goes into all the wheel wells. Next are these two small actuator levers for the inside of the wheel bay, already painted in aluminium. Now if you're having either or both of the ammo trays open, you'll need to trim the very tip of the relevant wing root. The door to the bay includes a part that replaces this. So now the two skins of the wing can go together. There are large location pins to help. Now, if you remember all those blanking plates I'm not using, you can trim them down and sand them and use them as masks for the interior bits for when you spray the outside of the aircraft. Or, of course, if you're brush painting, you don't need to do any of this. Next is the leading edge of the wing. This piece is for those having these slats deployed, which I am. If the slats are to be retracted, there's a different piece to attach. There are two small intake ducts for the underside, you should fit now, and there's also that fillet for the top of the fuselage, the one where we cut out the space earlier. Then behind that there's another fillet for the base of the fin or vertical stabiliser. So the next big task is to add the wings to the fuselage. Like so much else on this kit, it seems to fit very well and needs just a bit of tape to hold it in the right position. The ailerons and wing tips come as single units. You can't pose the ailerons at an angle. There are these two small panels on the fuselage to go in. Perhaps on other models they had camera ports or something else. I'm finishing the tail next. First the rudder goes into place at the back of the fin like so. Then the two tail planes can be fitted. These are all flying units, there's no separate elevator. They sit with an appreciable dihedral. Okay, so I'll let all that settle down, and in the meantime I'll assemble the wheels. Each comes, of course, in two halves. Now at the rear of the cockpit is this support structure. If you're having an open cockpit, this sits inside the canopy, otherwise place it here. I'm going to paint the gun sight now in black, including the frame of the sight glass itself. While that's drying, I'll start on the masks. For the windshield I'm using frog tape. Just lay a piece over the screen, then push into the corners of the window with something like a toothpick. Then use a fresh blade to cut carefully into the corners of the window frame. For the canopy, I use a flexible plastic tape for the edges as it follows the curves better than paper and cuts very precisely, but I'll fill in the middle with strips of paper. Now the paint's dried, I'm placing in the gun sight. Look, you'll see I've got some filler on here, but there is very, very little actually needed. I just haven't sanded it down yet. Then the glass can go in. First the windscreen goes into place and sets with some PVA glue. There's this large kind of navigation light here. I'm going to paint the inside of that with clear red to look like a bulb. This then fits onto that support structure in the rear of the cockpit. Then the main canopy itself can go on, again fixed with clear PVA. Leave it all to set, preferably overnight. Come the next day and I'm ready to start the paint job. First on we go with a coat of black gloss primer, and this will allow the metal colour paint to really shine out. Now let all of that dry very well, a couple of hours if possible. Because next I'm masking off the areas where I'm adding red paint on the fuselage and the wings. First of all I use a red as a kind of a base coat, and I'll finish it with a very light coat of the suggested gloss red so it matches the decals. Speaking of which, I can add all the decals now. With that done, the undercarriage is next. The main leg has a small door that's located in a notch at the top, but make sure there's still a square hole left, as this locates the leg in the wing. The main gear doors are two pieces glued together that then slot into a channel in the middle of the gear bay. The main well can then sit into the bay, that small hole I was speaking about locating on a small peg, and the gear door itself sitting in a slot. While that's drying, there are two tiny actuator arms for the main gear doors. The nose gear leg sits into a D-shaped slot, so it makes sure it goes in the right way round. Next is this lamp housing. For retracted undercarriage, this would be a clear part you mask off that gives the impression of stowed landing lights. Then the folded front doors for the nose gear bay hook into the edge of the lamp housing. A small brace leg fits into the nose gear bay next, attaching to the nose leg. The main door of the nose gear sits on the port side like this. Now with all that set, I can add the wheels. All of them have shaped slots so that the flat spot of the weighting sits correctly at the bottom. Next the fuel tanks go on. I've made these from 2 halves each, and they have small tail fins as well. And each of them has a small stabilising arm that attaches onto the side of the tank and the wing. The air brakes slot very easily into place. There's a ram that sits inside the fuselage, and that connects to the inside of the brake itself and sets the angle correctly. Now I'm going to add to the open door of the ammunition bay on the port side. You can see that cutout of the wing root now. Then I'll add the deployed slats to the leading edge of the wings. I've pre-painted them. Note the red seems offset when they're open, but it is actually in the right place. There's a small vent pipe to add at the tail, and then I can take off the canopy masks. We're almost there. Some bits of final paint, like the black nose of the ranging radar. Also, I'll add some wash to the panel lines. I'll wet them with water first, then apply the wash with a fine, long-haired brush, and I'm using a black wash here. Finally, I paint the back of the landing lights with aluminium to make them look like reflectors, then fit them just in front of the nose gear doors, and that is my Sabre finished. It's undeniably a lovely kit to build. There are lots of options, including the engine covers I added at the last minute. There's an awful lot of detail that you might choose not to fit, but you can decide that for yourself. Likewise, there are an awful lot of stencils. You may take a position of how many of those you really want to spend your time fitting on, but the general fit and finish of the kit is very, very good. I had no real issues along the way, and I think the end result is extremely pleasing. There we go, the F-86F-40 version of the Sabre classic aircraft. Could be a classic kit. If you've enjoyed the video, please do remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. The way to do that is to click on that tiny little logo down there in the bottom right corner. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps me. In any case, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.